Remember the 80s? No, seriously, do you remember it? Because I wasn't even born yet, so I don't remember anything. I'm just reading the words off of this script. A lot of stuff about speed in the 80s. Alright, now that we've met our 80s drug joke quota, we can get on with our lives and possibly stick to the fucking script. Remember the 80s? It was a time where the super fast race bikes were beginning to make names for themselves all over the world. Suddenly the combination of power and aerodynamics was on everyone's minds and knew that they needed to bring some of that technology and style to the street to keep up with the times. And while the manufacturers were on a craze to build super sport motorcycles, eventually there came a schism between super sport bikes built for all-around performance and those built for straight-line speed and stability. Sure, some clowns want to have some lightweight and well-cornering bike, but dude, seriously,
what makes the panties drop? I'll give you a hint. It ain't no lap time number. What does that mean to the average person, huh? Nothing. Miles per hour? No, muffs per hour.
The top speed wars of the 80s and the 90s and even the early 2000s were interesting because they were fought pretty much exclusively within Japanese factories, with Europe and America mostly just watching. Mostly. In fact, prior to that, it was actually mostly England and America going back and forth for the top spot between 1912 and 1975. So it was really almost 60 years before things started to diversify again. Most people don't really want to hear about that until about here. The Japanese top speed wars is one of those automotive stories that are shrouded in speculation, averages, and in some cases just straight up myth. What is true is that it created a Cold War-esque arms race for innovation and advancement of technology and a pushing of the limits of motorcycles. See, the bike that began the dominance of Japan in the quest of top speed was able to push to 150 miles per hour. Most people would agree that's plenty fast, but as it turns out, it wasn't quite fast enough for the land of the rising sun. Basically, they decided that your face could do with a little bit more rearrangement by the wind after they melted with the acceleration, of course. Either way, get those dead bugs out of your teeth, because it's time to discuss the top speed wars. The Honda VF1000 is the progenitor to all of this tomfoolery, and it was released in 1984. It was a big brother to the VF750, and it was also powered by a dual overhead cam V4 engine, 16 valves, liquid cooled, real modern engine, and it improved on the VF750's weakness, where the camshaft would often catastrophically fail as a defect from the factory on earlier models, which actually earned them the nickname chocolate cams, which kind of sounds like a grainy HBCU webcam porn site now that I think about it. Alright, dorm porn aside, the VF1000 line featured 3 bikes, but we're just going to focus on the VF1000R because that was a very fast one. It was basically the manifestation of Honda's love for the V4 engine and also that gear-driven cam system. The VF1000R was really a display of technology, and it was also a way to homologate all of that technology. Basically what that means is that pretty often when it comes to motorsports, manufacturers must essentially produce technology or even entire vehicles to be used by the public before they can be approved for use on the track. Generally speaking, to save money, manufacturers will simply do a limited run of race vehicles for the public to homologate it for the track teams. Now, I know this is a bike show, but think about the old Dodge Charger Daytona. You know, the one with the ridiculously tall wing and the pop-up headlights. That was a Charger that they used for NASCAR back in the day. But to homologate it, they had to sell it to the public first. They only made about 503 of them, but that was enough for approval. The VF1000R was a super limited run in the same vein. You know, I can't exactly find the exact number for a production run, but trust me, this isn't a bike that you would see every day. It's a little bit heavier than the F models, but at the same time, it also made more power, and it had much more high-class components, so it's not as heavy as it could have been because it used carbon fiber, aluminum, all those light materials. In my previous video about naked bikes, I spoke about the importance of aerodynamics in building bikes for speed. Hell, I just spoke about the Dodge Daytona. And I mean, look at that thing compared to the original barge that the Charger was. Those aerodynamic additions to a run-of-the-mill Charger actually helped propel it stably to 200 miles per hour. Because adding a ton of power to something doesn't mean much if it still has the aerodynamics of a fucking parachute. You notice that the VF1000R is the first bike on the list to use modern fairing sets, and no bike afterwards is naked. My point is very simple. Fairing sets help propel bikes to new ridiculous top speeds. Now the VF1000R was able to hit a top speed of 150 miles per hour and stay planted to the road. The VF1000R may have been limited, expensive, heavy, and it was prone to overheating at low speed. But you know what? It cracked open the upper half of speeds between 100 and 200 miles per hour for production bikes with that 150 mile per hour top speed. And nothing was the same after that. Yep, and then they got fucking one up by Kawasaki. And not even a couple months later. See, while Honda was being all bougie and showing off their technology, ooh, look at the V4 gear white, carbon fiber, chocolate cams. Kawasaki was in a cave somewhere for 6 years developing a 16-valve liquid-cooled inline 4-banger. It was actually the first to be used in a bike.
They were designing a vessel to carry that groundbreaking design, hidden away from the public in the shadows of Honda, like a ninja.
Yeah, the GPZ 900R.
Now, the GPZ 900R has been launched. See for yourself all the developments that have been incorporated in its design.
Or Ninja 900 for those of us who like to save time. It was actually in development since the late 70s, but Kawasaki was taking their time releasing it. And yes, the bike really topped out at 151, 1 mile per hour more than a Honda. So I guess this bike was the first production bike to crack the top half, right? Because I mean, 150 is actually still technically the bottom half, now that I think about it. My life is a lie! Whenever you see like a range number when it comes to the top speed on lists like this, it's because there were multiple published tests in which people were able to get the bike up to different top speeds. So the Ninja 900 lists between 151 and 158 miles per hour. 158 being the time when someone put a naked DJ Qualls on the bike and gave him a soup can for a helmet and sent them downhill. The speeds in between are the averages, but most people would jack that the 151 number is the most accurate, so you know what, that's what we're gonna go with, okay? So what did the Ninja 900 have going for it? 2 words.
Squid Cruise.
But seriously, the bike had a couple things going for it on top of the popularity from the movie Top Gun. Like I mentioned earlier, it was the first bike to run a 4-valve per cylinder liquid-cooled inline-4 engine on the street. The engine was mounted low in the frame and the dimensions were narrow, which means it was stable and it could really handle. The bike also used the engine as an integral part of the frame, so they were able to use less material, which helped the weight. You ever notice how modern bikes don't really have those old down tubes that would go in between the exhaust headers that you like see on older bikes? It's because they now use the engine itself as a sort of down tube, which is just as rigid, but obviously drops the weight of the bike because you have to use less metal. Hell, the VF1000R that I mentioned was still running down tubes. In reality, the VF1000R was a bit of a race bike, which means it kinda sucked around town, and it would overheat and start misfiring, because you have these 4 carbs just kind of shoved in the middle of the V4. It was a mess, man. It worked when you were going down the road, but like if you were stuck in traffic, oh god. The Ninja 900, however, was a bloody gentleman on the street, especially around town. Man, you got that big old fairing so you don't feel any wind. The forks had dive control and automatic variable damping system so that the amount of damping would change on the fly. And then it had a counterbalancer for the crankshaft, which reduced vibrations by a lot. The Ninja 900 was a solid bike and it held that record of 151 miles per hour. Or 158 miles per hour, I guess. Actually, when compared to the next bike, it doesn't really matter, does it? See, Kawasaki really pulled a
This isn't even my final form.
Because remember, the Ninja 900 isn't even a leader bike. Kawasaki said that they didn't really need 1000 cc's to break records, but then they changed their mind and were just like, yeah, we'll beat you plebs to the punch. So what happened? Old Saki broke their own record. Yo, Kawasaki is like the guy that constantly brags on shit that no one even asked them about. You know why? Because they did that shit twice. They made 2 different leader bikes, actually. Remember the Ninja 900 dropped in 84, and it held the record for 2 years. Then in 86, Kawi dropped the GPZ 1000 RX, or the Ninja 1000 for those of us who actually like to save time. Now, that bike was slated to replace the old 900, but as it turns out, Kawi just continued making both of them during the 1000R's short lifespan of just 2 years. Yeah, of course, the Ninja 1000 was the fastest bike from 1986 to 1988, with a top speed of about 159, 160, you know, and that was with the average rider on it. During this time, 2 years was pretty normal for a bike to go without a redesign or a remake, but Kawi actually completely axed the bike in 1988. And to add insult to injury for the poor Ninja 1000, they didn't even axe out the Ninja 900. The bike that the 1000 was meant to replace. That bike kept going to 96. What is that? I don't know, man. But still, 1988 actually saw that the Ninja 1000 was replaced with a much more impressive bike.
A Ninja ZX-10 Tom Cruise Tomcat.
Yep. What do you really want me to say at this point? It's another Kawasaki. The name is cool. They finally started using a ZX tag, which they still use today, but what made it faster than the GPZ 1000 RX blah 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 blah? This thing hit upwards of 165 miles per hour. And it did that by basically reworking the successes of the previous leader engine that Kawasaki had developed for the GPZ. It had the same overall design, but it also had upgraded carburetors, higher compression, lighter pistons, and bigger valves as well. Aerodynamically, it fucking blew the GPZ out of the water. Get that shit out of here. And it also used a lighter aluminum perimeter or twin spar frame, which is basically what you see on most sport bikes today. Basically, the ZX-10 was better in every single way, and it really just reflected Kawasaki's impressive drive to be the king of speed by producing 3 record-breaking bikes in a row before anyone else could so much as get a fucking word in.
Those 7 years of being Speed King would only last so long before someone decided that they wanted the crown going into the new decade, the 90s. Who came for the top spot? Find out soon in part 2.
And don't spoil it for yourself by looking it up if you don't know. Help me with the suspense here, guys. Come on. I'll see you in part 2.